Zohran Mamdani was fined $50,000 in court. No warning, no evidence, no chance to speak. But instead of stepping back, he stood hollow and challenged Justice Clarence Thomas in front of the entire nation. What happened next didn't just shift the courtroom, it shocked the country. The gavel came down with a sharp, cold crack. That sound, deliberate, unforgiving, sliced through the air like steel. Every head in the room turned toward the bench. Without hesitation, Justice Thomas leaned forward and delivered the blow. $50,000, payable within 30 days. Gasps echoed across the gallery, but Zohran didn't flinch. Wearing a charcoal gray suit, calm and composed, the New York State Assemblyman held Thomas's gaze with quiet defiance. Cameras snapped, pens flew, but Zohran stayed silent. For now, no warning, no hearing, no explanation, just a number, just a penalty. Somewhere near the back of the courtroom, a young clerk whispered, "Can he even do that?" Thomas didn't blink. He had done it, and now he reclined in expectation of silence, of submission, business as usual. But this wasn't business as usual, and Zohran Mamdani wasn't just another name on a docket. He drew a steady breath, his mind already calculating. He wasn't just standing in a courtroom. He was standing inside a message, sent not just to him, but to anyone who dared challenge the reach of judicial power, to organizers, to lawmakers, to the movement. This wasn't about a missed deadline. This wasn't about a form or a rule. It was political. It was personal. And it was precise. 30 seconds. That's all it took for Thomas to impose a life-altering fine. Not once did he ask for a response. He didn't expect pushback, but he was about to get it. Zohran stepped forward, steady, controlled. When he spoke, his voice was measured, but it echoed. "Justice Thomas, with respect, under what statute was this fine determined?" The room went still. No one questioned Clarence Thomas. Not like that, not openly. Thomas glanced down at the stack of papers before him. "This court reserves the right to impose sanctions for failure to comply with procedural orders." "And what evidence," Zohran said, louder tone, "do you have that I failed to comply?" No response, just silence. Tense, heavy, political. From the gallery, a low murmur. He's not backing down. Zohran turned not just to the bench, but to the room, to the public, the press, the nation. His voice sharpened, every word chosen. This isn't about process. This is about precedent. If fines can be handed down without evidence, without hearing, without due cause, we're not just bending the law, we're erasing it. He raised a slim binder. "This contains every communication from my office. Timestamps, confirmations, signatures, all filed, all within deadline, all per this court's own rules." He paused, locked eyes with Thomas. "So I'll ask again, where is your evidence?" Thomas's lips tightened. He didn't answer. He couldn't, because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Zohran was supposed to take the hit, quietly, let it roll off his shoulders. But now the cameras were rolling. Now the world was watching. And a simple courtroom sanction had become something else entirely. A challenge to unchecked power. A test of what justice even means. And who gets to define it? Zohran Mamdani wasn't going anywhere, because this was never about $50,000. It was about the principle, and this morning that principle had finally been called into question. For a man long accustomed to total control, Justice Clarence Thomas suddenly looked cornered. He shuffled the papers in front of him, not to read them. He already knew what they said. It was theater now, a delay, a search for composure. But Zohran had forced his hand, in public, on record. And now this courtroom wasn't a sanctuary. It was a spotlight, and Zohran wasn't done. "Let the record show," he said clearly and calmly, "that the defendant was not permitted to speak prior to the issuance of a punitive fine. Let the record also show that no evidence of wrongdoing was presented by the court." This wasn't drama, it was documentation. A receipt, a moment frozen in law. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Mr. Mamdani," he finally said, voice low but clipped, "this court is not a political stage." "No," Zohran replied, "but it is a legal one. and the law doesn't bend for power, not even yours. A hum of quiet affirmations swept through the gallery. Zohran's team, attorneys, aides, organizers, sat silently behind him, a line of calm resolve. None had expected a fight this bold, but now that it had begun, none regretted it. Thomas leaned back, steepling his fingers. This proceeding, he said, tone colder now, was scheduled as a compliance review. Your filings were incomplete. Zohran shook his head, slowly, deliberately. That's false. Thomas blinked. Zohran lifted a second folder labeled Exhibit A. This includes email confirmations from your own clerk's office. Every required document, every timestamp. Nothing was missing. You are not authorized to— I'm authorized, Zohran cut in, to defend myself against arbitrary penalties. I'm authorized to demand due process. Outside the courthouse, the story had already exploded. Social media was on fire. Hashtags trending. Clips of Zohran standing his ground against Justice Thomas were going viral. Cable news had cut into regular programming. The Hill was buzzing, phones vibrating, staffers whispering. What was supposed to be a dry procedural hearing had become a political earthquake. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just about Zohran anymore. It was about whether the most powerful judge in the country could silence a public official without reason. And if he could silence Zohran, who else could be next? Thomas moved to regain control. Mr. Mamdani, this court will recess for 10 minutes. But Zohran didn't move. Why recess now, Your Honor? He asked. You've already ruled. Shouldn't you be able to defend that ruling? Thomas didn't respond. He stood and left the bench, back stiff, the silence deafening behind him. Zohran turned to the courtroom, his voice carrying without force. Let the record reflect, he said, that this court recessed without response when challenged on the basis of due process. A journalist in the front whispered, this is going to blow up. And it would, because while the judge left behind silence, Zohran left behind questions. Big ones. Why the rush to find him? Why no hearing? Why refuse to examine the evidence? And perhaps most critically, what was this find really about? By the time Zohran walked out of the courtroom, the world had changed. Cameras flooded the steps. Reporters jostled for space. Microphones stretched toward him like spears. Shutters clicked with every step. No one shouted his name. Yet somehow, everyone was listening. He didn't wave. He didn't pose. He simply stepped to the line of microphones and spoke. There will be no comment at this time, he said, but I will say this. Justice demands evidence, not silence. Then he turned and stepped into the waiting black SUV. The door slammed shut behind him. Inside, his phone lit up with alerts, buzzing nonstop. Over a dozen missed calls, 34 unread messages. In the SUV, Zohran sat still, his jaw tight. Next to him, his aide Samira was scrolling frantically through trending headlines. You're everywhere, she said, half whisper, half awe. They're calling it Mamdani va. Thomas. Zohran didn't reply. He stared out the window as the courthouse disappeared behind them. But the moment, the weight of it, the silence, the confrontation, kept playing in his mind. Did we mean for this to happen? Samira asked. No, Zohran said, but maybe we should have. Cable news interrupted normal broadcasts. Breaking, State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani fined 50 Mars, Bowie Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, then confronts him in a stunning legal standoff, igniting questions about judicial overreach and the limits of unchecked power. Back on Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both parties were reacting, some cautiously, others with sharp alarm. Senator Bernie Sanders tweeted, if Justice Thomas fined a sitting legislator without due process, he violated the very principles of justice he's sworn to uphold. Representative Lauren Boebert countered, this is classic progressive theater. Mamdani's playing martyr because he knows his policies can't win on merit. But the most unexpected response came from Elon Musk, who posted one sentence to his millions of followers. Thomas picked the wrong guy. It had over 2.3 million likes within an hour. Samira held out her phone. You're trending #1. Zohran exhaled slowly. Let them talk. But what now? She asked. Zohran's eyes didn't leave the windshield. Now we make them answer because this isn't just about one ruling. It's a line in the sand. For the first time in months, Zohran wasn't defending someone else's cause or protesting someone else's injustice. He was defending his own rights, in full view of the country. And in that clarity, he understood something fundamental. If he backed down now, Thomas would win. But if he kept pressing, if he turned this from a personal penalty into a public challenge, then this wouldn't end with one fine being overturned. It could reset the conversation entirely. Not just about the courts, but about who holds power and who holds them accountable. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. When Justice Thomas finally returned to the bench, the air in the room had changed. The pressure that had pressed on Zohran now seemed to press down on Thomas. The cameras were still rolling, and every journalist who had shown up for a procedural sideshow now realized they were witnessing something bigger. This wasn't just a legal hearing anymore. It was a reckoning. Thomas adjusted his robe stiffly as he sat. His gaze scanned the courtroom, cautious, calculating. Zohran rose again, calm but resolute, unshaken. Thomas cleared his throat. This court will resume. Mr. Mamdani, before we proceed, I will remind you, courtroom decorum must be maintained. Zohran didn't flinch. And I will remind this court, he said evenly, that constitutional rights must be honored. It wasn't a jab, it was a fact, delivered with precision, with purpose. Thomas hesitated, then reached for the folder Zohran had submitted before recess, Exhibit A. He flipped through the pages, timestamps, signatures, email confirmations from his own clerk's office. The room was so silent, the smallest sounds rang out. A cough, a pen click, the sound of truth setting in. Finally, Thomas spoke, low, guarded. Exhibit A appears to contain proper documentation. A few heads turned, eyebrows lifted. Appears. That was the word Justice Thomas chose. Zohran didn't let it slide. With respect, there is no appears in due process, he said. The documents either meet the requirements or they don't. A pause, tight, measured. They do, Thomas admitted. Zohran exhaled, just slightly. But this wasn't over. The fine was still in place. Thomas leaned forward again. This court will review whether the fine was issued prematurely. Until such review is complete, the penalty remains. There it was, the move. Delay, bureaucracy, distance. Zohran didn't blink. Then I formally request that a public transcript of today's proceedings be released by end of day. That stopped the room cold, bold, very bold. Thomas looked up sharply. That is not standard procedure. Zohran took a single step forward. Neither is a $50,000 fine with no hearing. The gallery stirred. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, Clarence Thomas looked like the one on trial, and everyone saw it. The reporters, the aides, the legal analysts watching live on split screens in newsrooms across the country. Thomas paused, then said slowly, "The request will be considered." Zohran nodded once. Let the record reflect that. Let the cameras record it. Let the public see someone stand their ground while power blinked. And while the fine still hung in the air, so did something else. Heavier, slower, more dangerous. Doubt. Doubt about Justice Thomas, about the system, about how close America had come to letting silence count as justice. That night, Washington didn't sleep. Capitol Hill buzzed like it hadn't in years. Group chats lit up. Texts crossed party lines. Phones rang past midnight. Zohran Mamdani had walked into a courtroom as a state legislator. He walked out a national symbol. Across TVS networks, legal experts debated what they'd witnessed. He cited precedent under pressure. He challenged one of the most powerful judges in the country. I've never seen anything like it. Even Capitol Hill had no choice but to respond. Senator Mike Lee called for a judiciary review panel. Senator Ted Cruz demanded Thomas issue a public explanation or recuse himself from any case involving elected officials. Moderate Democrats? Silent. Too silent. And that silence spoke volumes. But the most unexpected comment came from someone who usually said nothing. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a rare off-record remark, was overheard saying, "Power is not accountability proof. And if it is, we've already lost the point of the court." That quote lit the match. Within hours, the judiciary inbox was flooded with public demands for Thomas to issue a written explanation. In his office back in Queens, Zohran sat behind his desk. Emails stacked by the second, mentions, alerts, messages from lawmakers, organizers, strangers. His phone rang. He didn't need to look. "Mr. President," Zohran answered calmly. President Biden's voice came through, measured. "You showed guts today." "I showed the truth." "I know, and the country saw it too." There was a beat. "You ready for what's next?" "I think we're already in it." Zohran ended the call and turned to Samira, who was now sorting folders across the desk. "Fox wants you in the morning," she said. "Also MSNBC. Even Tucker Carlson's team reached out. They want to reframe it as an anti-establishment moment." Zohran sighed. "I'm not doing a victory tour." Samira nodded. "Then what are you doing?" He didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the framed copy of the Constitution hanging crooked on the wall. "Something better." That night, Zohran wrote a statement, not about the fine, not even about Thomas, but about the system. Americans deserve a legal process that begins with facts, not fear. Our courts must answer to the Constitution, not to the people who wear the robe. Authority without accountability is not justice. It is something far more dangerous. The statement went viral before midnight. Our courts must answer to the Constitution, not personalities. We cannot let authority go unquestioned. Not in silence, not anymore. Those words exploded across the internet. Within 30 minutes, they were everywhere. Local radio hosts repeated them. State lawmakers quoted them on the floor. Student groups printed them on flyers. Due process trended nationally for the first time in years. This wasn't about one fine anymore. It was becoming a movement. And Zohran knew exactly what that meant. He couldn't stop now. Not when the country had just started to listen. 2 days after the hearing, the legal brief hit the docket like a thunderclap. Mamdani versus Thomas. Motion to vacate sanction on grounds of judicial misconduct. No one had expected him to take it this far. Not against a Supreme Court justice. Not in federal court. But there it was. 12 pages of cold facts, legal citations, and searing clarity. Sharp, precise, public. Zohran wasn't hiding behind lawyers. He had signed it himself. His name was on the first page. His words were on the last. This motion is not merely about a fine. It is about precedent. If the highest court in the land can issue punishment without hearing, without evidence, and without rebuttal, then the law has no anchor. I will not stand by while that anchor is cut loose. The legal world went into overdrive. Thomas remained silent. No statement, no clarification. But the implications were impossible to ignore. If the motion was accepted, it would trigger a formal review of his conduct and open the gates to long-avoided scrutiny of internal judicial power. That morning, Zohran's legal team met in a small, rented conference room just blocks from the Capitol. Samira handed out coffee. Their lead counsel, a former federal prosecutor named Dean Walton, stood by the whiteboard, laser-focused. "We're not just challenging the fine," Walton said. "We're exposing the pattern." He clicked through court memos, drawing a timeline. 3 sanctions in the last 2 years, all against progressive or anti-establishment officials. No hearings, no notice, no explanation. Zohran nodded. "So we don't just make it about Thomas. We make it about the system." "Exactly," Walton said. They spent hours combing through internal memos, court logs, procedural anomalies. Then Walton pulled up a transcript from 6 months earlier. Another unexplained fine, this time against a lower-level agency director who had questioned federal overreach in environmental policy. Zohran stared at the screen. "Same handwriting," he murmured. Walton turned to him. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Zohran nodded slowly. "They're testing boundaries," he said, "seeing how far they can push it before someone pushes back. And now someone has." Meanwhile, Thomas stayed silent. No public comment, no press release. But behind closed doors, the pressure was mounting. Judicial liaisons sent quiet messages to the White House. "Tone it down." Let it cool off. Have him back away, quietly. Zohran ignored all of them, because this wasn't about winning a headline anymore. It was about principle. Samira slid him a folder. These are the media requests for next week. Fox, CNN, even Al Jazeera wants a segment. And this, she tapped another folder, is a draft proposal for a national panel on judicial transparency. They want you to lead it. Zohran didn't open either. Not yet. We wait until they respond, he said. Samira raised an eyebrow. And if they don't? Zohran looked up from his desk. Then we make them. Outside the window, DC churned. Lawmakers, reporters, lobbyists, racing from one scandal to the next. But inside that room, something steadier was building. Not noise, not chaos, clarity. A fight for transparency, for limits, for law over legacy. And for the first time in years, it wasn't the system writing the rules. It was someone daring to question them. Out loud, and with evidence in hand. It was someone daring to question them. The marble steps of the Supreme Court had never felt heavier. Reporters no longer just passed by, they lingered, all day and night. They weren't chasing stories anymore. They were waiting for something or someone to walk out those doors and speak. Inside the building, the silence turned uneasy. Whispers became murmurs, clerks exchanged quiet looks. Justices skipped scheduled lunches. The pressure from a single ruling had sunk deep into the foundation of the court. And for the first time in his long tenure, Justice Clarence Thomas was on the defensive. Not publicly, not yet. But behind closed doors, the court was fracturing. Justice Alito reportedly confronted Thomas in chambers, read one leak. "We're not dictators, Clarence," he allegedly said. "And you just handed that man a constitutional slingshot." Thomas hadn't responded. What could he say? Zohran hadn't broken any rules. He'd followed them. Exactly. And then he'd used those very rules as a weapon. And now the judiciary, long protected by the illusion of unquestionable authority, was being challenged in ways no one had expected. Outside, the fallout spread. Zohran's legal motion had opened the floodgates. 3 former public officials came forward, each with eerily similar stories. Each had been fined, sanctioned, or silenced by administrative judges. No hearing, no evidence. Just punishment, wrapped in procedure and backed by silence. But now they were being heard. A coalition of civil liberties groups, including the ACLU, Brennan Center, and Judicial Reform Network, released a joint statement. "We may not agree with Assemblyman Mamdani politically, but justice is not partisan. His challenge has revealed a dangerous erosion of due process that can no longer be ignored." It made front-page news. Zohran read it the next morning over breakfast. Across the table, Samira scrolled through updates on her tablet. "You've got the ACLU quoting you, Zoe," she said. Zohran didn't even look up from his coffee. "They're not quoting me, he said. They're quoting the Constitution." Across town, the Senate Judiciary Committee held an emergency review session. Not a hearing, not yet, but it was a start. Questions were raised, quietly but seriously. Did the judiciary have internal standards for issuing sanctions? Was there any oversight mechanism? Could fines be used as political tools? It was all procedural, all cautious, but it was moving. And now, the legal world, the institutions, the law schools, the bar associations, they were all watching. Zohran, meanwhile, stayed disciplined. No press tour, no victory lap, no rallies, just one interview. A primetime appearance on national cable news. The host leaned in, eyebrows raised. "Do you think you've embarrassed the court?" Zohran looked directly into the camera. "I think the court embarrassed itself." That clip went viral within the hour. College students started quoting it. Young progressives called him the Constitution's bodyguard. Others, even former skeptics, simply called him brave. But Zohran didn't care about the labels. He cared about what came next. Because even though he was winning the argument, the fine still stood. And he knew Thomas would strike back. He had to. Because if he didn't, the next challenger wouldn't wait for permission either. The retaliation came just after noon. A heavy envelope, no return address, gold-embossed watermark, was hand-delivered to Zohran's legal office. Inside, a rare judicial declaration signed by Clarence Thomas himself. It was short, brutal, clear. The $50,000 fine would stand. There would be no hearing, no review, no reconsideration, and worse, an official statement from the court. Mr. Mamdani's actions constitute public theatrics designed to undermine the credibility of the judiciary. Dean Walton slammed the file shut. "This isn't just retaliation," he said. "This is desperation." Zohran didn't speak. He didn't have to. The gloves were off. Samira leaned across the conference table, voice low but sharp. "He's reframing the whole thing. It's not about the fine anymore. He's making you the threat. Not your motion, not your evidence. You." Zohran nodded slowly. "Then he's scared." Across the city, newsrooms scrambled to make sense of the judicial declaration. Some anchors defended Thomas, painting Zohran as reckless, too loud, too political, too ambitious, the usual list. Others weren't so sure. By doubling down, one analyst said, Thomas may have just handed Mamdani a bigger microphone. At the White House, staffers debated issuing a statement, but when the president finally weighed in, it was clear and firm. Let him speak for himself. America's already listening. Back in Queens, Zohran sat alone in his office, the declaration open in front of him. He read it again and again. It didn't address the evidence, didn't answer the motion, didn't even try to justify the fine. It wasn't a legal defense. It was a power play. But power plays only work when no one pushes back. So, he did. At 7:45 p.m., Zohran stepped to the podium at a press conference announced just 30 minutes earlier. No party banners, no official backdrop, just a flag, just the seal of the State Assembly. He looked directly into the cameras. "I was fined without a hearing. When I asked for evidence, I was told to be silent. When I refused, I was called a threat." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I don't care what they call me. I care that the law was broken. And if standing up for the Constitution makes me a threat to the system, then maybe it's the system that needs to change." The flashbulbs erupted. Zohran stepped back from the podium. He didn't take questions. He didn't need to. That night, everything shifted. The fine was no longer the issue. Thomas's silence was. And that silence had now become his answer. By morning, it was too late to contain. People had watched the press conference. They'd heard Zohran's calm, his clarity, his conviction. And they responded, not with noise, but with action. A bipartisan group of senators issued a formal request for a judiciary oversight hearing. Not just about the fine, about Clarence Thomas himself. It was the first action of its kind in over 50 years. No statement came from Thomas. But inside the court, aides whispered that 2 clerks had quietly requested transfers. The institution was cracking. Its reputation, long protected by tradition and silence, was no longer untouchable. Zohran, meanwhile, said nothing further. He didn't have to. The country had taken over. Across college campuses, students began organizing forums under the hashtag #DueProcess. Law professors published open letters. Former judges, once silent, began speaking up. Judge Lisa Markham, retired from the Ninth Circuit, told a national outlet, "When a Supreme Court justice punishes speech with power instead of law, he becomes exactly what the Constitution was written to prevent." That quote alone reignited the fire. Outside federal courthouses, peaceful protests began to form. Not mobs, not anger, purpose. Veterans, law students, parents holding signs that read, "Speak, defend, prove, or resign." In Zohran's office, Samira walked in carrying a stack of envelopes. "Half of these are from people you've never met," she said. "The other half are from people who never thought they'd agree with you." Zohran flipped through them slowly. Letters from retired military officers, former Republicans, libertarians, union workers, mothers, farmers. The fight had outgrown him. This wasn't about Zohran anymore. This was about every American who'd ever been told to sit down and stay silent, and finally saw someone stand up. One letter read, "I didn't vote for your party. I probably won't, but I believe in what you just did." Zohran set it down gently. Just then, Dean Walton entered, laptop under his arm. The appellate court just released its preliminary review, he said. They're recommending an emergency hearing on Justice Thomas's conduct. Zohran sat up. What does that mean? Dean didn't hesitate. It means your challenge just became a case study, one voice forcing the law to answer. Zohran didn't smile, not yet. Not while the fine still stood, not while Thomas still refused to speak. Because winning wasn't just about overturning a ruling, it was about restoring something deeper. Trust. The kind that power had quietly eroded. The kind the courtroom tried to take away. And once trust is broken, it must be rebuilt. Publicly, openly, relentlessly. This time the burden wasn't on Zohran, it was on the bench. The courtroom was full again. But the energy was different now, no longer hostile, no longer chaotic. It was expectant, focused, determined. People weren't there to watch a punishment. They were there to witness an answer. Zohran sat calmly at the front, flanked by his attorneys. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't matter. Every major network had analysts on standby, waiting. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the three-judge appellate panel entered. Everyone rose. No delay, no pageantry. In a clear, direct voice, the presiding judge read the ruling. After reviewing procedural conduct, evidentiary filings, and public record, this panel finds that the sanction imposed by Justice Clarence Thomas lacked due process and failed to meet the standard of judicial fairness. A sharp breath moved through the gallery. The $50,000 fine is hereby vacated. The case is closed. Zohran didn't move, didn't celebrate. He just nodded. Once, it was over in the room. But outside, it was just beginning. As Zohran stepped onto the courthouse steps, the crowd didn't cheer. They applauded, measured, respectful, purposeful. He raised one hand, not to celebrate, but to thank them. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word landed. Justice was never meant to be about silence, or fear, or submission. Today, the law remembered that. And with that, he walked down the steps. The fine was gone, the ruling reversed. But what remained was bigger. Days later, Thomas issued a terse statement. No apology, no explanation, just a line about moving forward. But by then, the conversation had already moved past him. Senators introduced a bipartisan bill, the Due Process Enforcement Act, requiring that any administrative fine above $10,000 must come with evidentiary hearings and public documentation. Civic organizations launched town halls on legal accountability. And in high school debate competitions, students began quoting Zohran's final line. Justice isn't something we're granted, it's something we insist on. Zohran returned to his legislative work quietly. No rallies, no branding, no political rebranding. But across the country, people remembered what he did, how he stood his ground, how he questioned power, how he won. Not just a case, but the nation's attention. He didn't start a revolution. He didn't burn anything down. He simply reminded the system that it still answers to the people. And sometimes it only takes one voice to say, not this time, not like this.